Isabel, we're here to talk about your journey with Parkinson's. So maybe we can start. You did mention migraines early on in life. Could you describe sort of the frequency thereof, the intensity of?
I had one migraine from watching a movie once, sitting in the front row when I was about 17, I suppose, when I was younger. Never had one since. Then when I was 29, I think, just before I got pregnant, I started getting migraines in America. They got more and more frequent. I was prescribed, I think it was called Midodrine or Midrin. It had a very high level of paracetamol. It had a sedative. It was the only thing. I mean, I tried everything. I tried all the things that they have. So I took these very strong pills, and they had told me as soon as you feel one coming on, that's the time to take it, because of course after that your digestive system might not absorb it properly because you start feeling sick. So I did. In the end, I was taking them every day, probably 2 or 3 times a day for quite a few years. My migraines continued. Eventually, when I was getting divorced, coming back to it, so I'd been on them quite a while, I weaned myself off. That was so difficult. I think the doctor gave me, that's when the doctor in England, then also I was very strict. He prescribed me trazodone hydrochloride to help me sleep. They help with the migraines. I've really not had a migraine since then. So that was migraines. But I've had a host of other things, which of course, when you know you've got Parkinson's finally, 20 years later, it makes sense. I'll tell you about all those symptoms, but at the time, nobody ever sort of linked them up. I don't know if there's the awareness that there is now as well. Obviously, I didn't think about Parkinson's. I just knew some uncle had died with it at about 87, 88, but hadn't had it for long. He'd only had it for 2 years. It was definitely something I thought of as an older man's disease. I didn't think anything of it. But my initial symptoms, things that I now link to it, all the problems with my hands. I had done a huge concert in Jacksonville, Florida. It was over 4,500 people in this stadium. I was playing. I was asked to play. I was standing in for someone who couldn't make it, a pianist who couldn't make it. So I'd only had 4 weeks to learn Rhapsody in Blue and concerto. So it was all very intense. I was doing fine because I can learn with my brain as much as with my hands. Even if I was flying, doing other things in aeroplanes, I could learn this music. But they said, what kind of piano would you like? I said, a Börsdorfer, thinking that was a nice fluid sound. So they very kindly got me Oscar Peterson's Börsdorfer down from Chicago. I don't know if you know Oscar Peterson, great big jazz player, huge, fantastic. It had the extra octave of keys. For me, I could hardly push the notes down. It was so heavy, the action. So I practiced on that for about a week and a half. My hands seized up. I could hardly even turn my wrists over. Of course, if that happened at this age, you'd say, sorry, can't do the, but at that age, you're so keen to make a good impression that, anyway, I had to go. I had hot wax treatment, ice, all this sort of thing. I had to learn the whole thing, like just completely in my head. A week before the concert, I started just moving my fingers like this on the keys. We're still wearing wrist braces. I don't know how I did it. I did do the concert. I think I may have had a microphone in the piano to help the sound because, I was feeling a bit weak, but I did it. But ever since then, that over practicing, every time I practice the piano, pain, stiffness, this sort of thing. I was tested many, many times with nerve conduction studies, everything else. They could never quite say, yes, it's carpal tunnel. They didn't quite know what it was. They'd go, well, it's sort of tendonitis. It's, now looking back, reading all about Parkinson's, it could well have been like RSI or the things that Parkinson's people start getting, all these pains, this stiffness. I had frozen shoulder. I have had, just so many things. I might think of the other ones, gut problems. I feel that the gut Parkinson's, the gut-brain relationship is very important. I think when I was working, being director of music, I just didn't eat properly. I was rushing all the time. So I would eat at school lunch, which is, not particularly healthy. And then 2 packets of crisps, little packets of crisps on the way home in the car. I would, just wasn't eating properly at all. It was, so I think that contributed a lot. I wasn't really exercising very well either. So I had a lot of previous symptoms. Finally, I was seeing a doctor about something in 2017, That's right. No, 2016 in the December. The doctor noticed I was on beta blockers, with just a very small dose, which was what I was taking then to prevent migraines. So she said, I don't know why you're taking them. It's such a low dose. It's not doing anything. So I stopped taking them. Within about a week, my hand developed a slight tremor. Somebody noticed it. Your hand's tremor. I thought it's become noticeable. So I went back to the doctor. I saw two doctors, both of whom said, you definitely don't present as someone with Parkinson's. You don't have Parkinson's. I've even got that written down in my medical notes, so it's not just me making this up. But, you know, I saw it. The young lady definitely did not present with Parkinson's. So I went privately to a private doctor. He had me do all the tests where you lie back on your back, you cross your arms, and then you have to count backwards from 1,000 in sevens or something, you know, something awkward. I was doing it because I'm so competitive, of course. I was trying to go as fast as I could. I wasn't thinking about my hands at all. I realized my hands were starting to shake, my arms. He said, I really do think you do have Parkinson's. He said, but I'll tell you what, I'll get the DAT scan test just to be sure, which they don't often do. I don't know why I was so lucky, really. Anyway, he got that done for me on the NHS. He said, oh my goodness, one side has practically nothing in it. The other side's got very little. So it's something like 2.15 on one side. Then the side, my right brain that controls my left hand, had barely anything, 1 or something. So he said, you do have Parkinson's. So he started talking about treatment, offered me dopamine agonists, but of course warned me about the obsessive behavior. I was terrified of that. So I didn't actually start taking any medication until that December. So I went, you know, I think a lot of people do that. I know it's almost like you're scared to start, because also even with levodopa in particular, you hear these stories that you've got 5 years and then it doesn't work anymore. So should we start it later? This is what I think patients tend to feel. Maybe we should start it later. Then we've got 5 years. Maybe I should hang on. But in the end, the doctor talked a bit of sense into me. I saw a very top doctor here. I was very lucky. Again, privately, she also worked for the NHS. I saw her, first of all, when I still had private insurance, when I first came to Oxfordshire. Doctor Who, her name is. She's HU, not WHO. Doctor Who. Absolutely fantastic. She does research all around the world and everything. And so she got me onto the levodopa, carbidopa. So I didn't ever take the agonists, to be honest. Rasagiline. I was markedly better, but from that day onwards, I've been an insomniac. Could not, until very recently, could not sleep at all night long, listening. The church is next door to me, so the church bells ring every 15 minutes. They mark the time. On the hour, they mark to us that number of chimes. I heard every chime every night. I was a mess, you know, but I would get up during the day. I'd always conk out for about an hour during the day. I could have slept all day. It's just ridiculous, but I could not sleep at night. Just recently, we tried amitriptyline because I get a lot of leg pain at night. That has sorted that more or less. I'm taking a very small dose, because now I'm also taking a teeny tiny dose, 0.250 micrograms of clonazepam. That has completely sorted out my sleep problem. I mean, it's not that I get continuous sleep, because you get up to pee, you get up, you know, there's always something that wakes you up, but I can fall asleep, which I couldn't do. So there is hope if you can't sleep. I honestly thought there was nothing that was going to make me sleep ever. That I, like Michael Jackson or something, you know, just have to overdose myself so much that I couldn't function. So yeah, so that's where I am now. So I'm functioning. I tend to be very upbeat. Everybody thinks, oh, she's so up. By the time my friends see me, you know, I've spent an hour, 2 hours taking my pills, eating my breakfast. My husband brings me breakfast in bed, take my pills. It's quite slow. I feel in the mornings. But by the time I get out to see people, they go, I can't believe there's anything wrong with you, you know, but I don't last very long. So I can do a few hours of something. Then I feel I've just got to stop for an hour. Then I can come back again.
No, not at all, not at all. This is perfect. You certainly talked a lot about your journey as you've gone through. You mentioned an acronym. Was it RSI or R?
Oh yes, repetitive strain injury. Sorry, yes. So I wondered if it was that, you know, because when I'm composing, I do it all on the typewriter, on the computer. You know, I'm typing in on the Sibelius program. Obviously, I try things out on the piano because I'm a pianist. That's my number one thing. But I actually do all the composition on I would, again, I'm so obsessive, I suppose, competitive. I would, once I get going, I don't stop. I do day, night, keep going, 48-hour stints. I can't help it. I've got to finish things, make things perfect. Something I do wonder is if Parkinson's does strike type A personalities more than, I mean, certainly I'm a lot calmer than I used to be with all these drugs I take. So I'm a lot more mellow than I used to be, perhaps.
I can imagine, you're a pianist, you are straining your hand. So saying carpal tunnel is kind of the easy answer, the straightforward answer. So you almost have to say to the clinicians, I kind of forgive that in a way, right? Because
I'm not angry at anybody. I mean, no, who would have known really? I think there should be some database. I'm sure there ought to be, where because the NHS has a database with each of us on it. How come some app doesn't link up your symptoms from you've ever had and go, da, 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 could be a neurological illness she's got. Do you know what I mean? Rather than treating each thing I had, it was quite a lot, but a sciatica, terrible sciatica I was getting. I had several operations, just, the injection things, just so many things like that. None of it got linked up together. It was all treated as separate things, which is great that I was treated. It's all free over here, so I can't complain. But I'm surprised there isn't an app that puts all that together on a person. Says to a doctor, hey, have you thought about that and the other? Maybe it's that. Because, of course, you do it yourself on Google. You've got the worst, every terrible disease that's going to kill you.
So it was migraine. You mentioned frozen shoulder. You mentioned the sciatica. What might have been carpal tunnel.
Yes,
and all of it. Yeah, this constellation thing.
So I've had scopes down there, scopes up there. Thought I'd got an ulcer. Thought I'd got this, or I'd got really gas collecting in my. They called it splenic flexure or something like that, but I don't think it's that uncommon. But it's a sort of, I've just had problems with everything. I haven't been at death's door with them, but the health service always taken me seriously. I mean, I don't think they think I'm a hypochondriac, but you feel like a hypochondriac by the time you go, I'm not that old here. I was feeling stiffer. I think that's what worried me. I'd see people my age when I was doing drama rehearsals, music rehearsals, they'd be kneeling on the floor and then they'd stand up again. I think, I don't think I could do that. I wouldn't dare get down there because I'm not sure I could get up again. It would be embarrassing in front of all these people. My knees, terrible knees. I had both knees done, arthroscopies on both knees. I just had so many things.
As you described the constellation of symptoms, folks might have thought of an arthritis of sorts or some sort of inflammation. Did anyone ever?
Yeah, even when I have x-rays, they always say, you've got inflammation, it's arthritis, it's probably arthritis. So I expect I do have that as well, but nobody ever connected some neurological thing to it. You have to sort of shout out for yourself and do research, but I don't know, some people, older people who aren't used to the internet, for instance, how do they do the research? If they're not used to computers, it's bad enough at my age.
Well, so your uncle, you mentioned that he was diagnosed in his 90s. He probably had it for many, many, many years before that, but it was probably at a time where,
yes,
the information wasn't available.
He came across as depressed. He came across as a bit doddery. All the things that now you realise. Yeah, depression. I already mentioned that. A terrible. After I got pneumonia in 2002, I was working in a very, very rough school, which didn't suit me at all. It was awful. Everything was stressful. Family problems. My dad went blind. Blah blah blah. I ended up with pneumonia. It was really weird because then I was in hospital for 2 weeks. It was quite serious. They treated me with morphine. Then I was kind of left on morphine, quite a big dose, 4 times a day morphine. It was wonderful. I just sort of slept through the next few months. But then suddenly depression kicked in when I came off the morphine. So I came off it. Depression. Oh dear, the sun would be shining. I'd be thinking, why can't I feel anything? I don't belong to this world anymore. That was really one of the most debilitating things I've ever experienced. And then as that continued, then I got anxiety syndrome on top of that. So I was like electric shocks going through me all the time. I didn't want to stand near, I couldn't listen to anybody. It was like panic attack. I've got to get out of here. That was horrible. Those electric shocks up and down my body, a bit like restless legs, I suppose. Horrible, horrible feeling. I dread it to this day. The only thing that could get rid of that was diazepam. But of course, doctors don't like don't like to prescribe that because it's so addictive. Yes, it is. You take the first night you take one, it's like, oh, thank goodness, you get finally it stopped. The next night, didn't quite work, so you need 2 and you need 1.5 pills. Then the next night you need 2 pills, and that's when you realise better not do this. So you have to go to the doctor. So luckily, right now with this tiny dose I've got of clonazepam, it's only to say 2.250 micrograms of it, but it seems to be that it doesn't knock me out, but it helps me get to sleep. I wish I didn't have to have pills. My grandmother, who lived to 99, she never took a pill in her life. She was supposed to take blood pressure pills, but she didn't even take paracetamol. So I don't know whether I've just had too many pills over the years. Maybe that contributes to Parkinson's. I do wonder, because I had some pretty strong migraine pills and pretty strong antidepressants.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where the root cause of something as complex as something that happens with the brain, that becomes very challenging. There's a lifetime of things that could possibly be associated with it. So we may never know, right? It's one of those. Yeah. So constellation of these things in isolation, maybe an observation could be that it was over a longer period of time. They didn't all happen at once, because if they had, maybe you would have done something or gotten a more thorough workup. So in a way, the slowness of the journey maybe contributed to the length of the journey, perhaps.
Yes. I think I was thinking the other day, I think the migraines were the first. I think that was probably the first symptom that led to the hands thing, which I of course thought was totally physical, rather than anything to do with the brain sort of thing. But I think it was probably linked to a certain extent. And then all the other things, frozen shoulder, I was just getting so many things, it was ridiculous. The sciatica, dreadful pain. That was almost worse than childbirth. It's awful. Constant, because it doesn't leave you, sciatica. It doesn't ease. It's not like, I don't know, it's not like a sort of a foot that's you've had an operation on, you take medicine, it works for a bit, and then it wears off, so you take some more medicine. Sciatica, nothing touched it, except when I then went into hospital each time, I had an injection in my back of the steroids and the block. There's some sort of block they give you so you stop feeling pain. That would work for nearly a year, I suppose, and then it would all come back again. So yes, I think I probably had symptoms leading up to whatever it is. I do wonder if I suppose Parkinson's is the name for when you lose the dopamine specifically. But I do wonder if one day they'll find out that these are all kinds of different neurological diseases. There are so many of them that they'll probably find it quite hard to treat, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think that's probably right. As we've learned about cancer, for example, lung cancer is not lung cancer. It's 1,000 different lung cancers. So, with the complexity of the brain, right, I can only imagine that there would be different types, different kinds. We just don't have the tools or the ability to understand and differentiate, which, that's why science needs to keep progressing.
I mean, science was so brilliant finding the cure for COVID, not the cure, but the vaccine for COVID. We all worked together. I wrote one article on this for the website I write for. But, it's such a global effort. It was fantastic. At the time, there was no war, nothing like that was happening. We were all trying to find this vaccine. We got it. So that if they all worked together, were allowed that opportunity, the scientists around the world could find a cure for, I'm sure they could find a cure for Parkinson's or something. Because we have got such an old-fashioned treatment still, with Mr. Parkinson, Dr. Parkinson or whatever. It hasn't changed since the 50s, the levodopa stuff. So I think there are new things. I have a friend who's just got Parkinson's. He's trialing all kinds of drugs. He's managed to get drugs that are being trialed. He has managed to get hold of. He said, I don't care which one works, as long as one of them works. So there are new things they're trying, but I don't think it'll ever be enough to treat somebody who's quite far down the line. It seems to be they're more focusing on catching it before it blows up. You've actually got it. I always remember my doctor saying to me, the neurologist, by the time your hand is shaking, you've lost your dopamine. So that's the trouble. We've used shaking as pretty much most people go, there's something wrong with him, he's shaking a bit. before anything else. Everything else you could attribute to something else. So you go to the doctor with a shaking, but by that time, your dopamine's nearly gone. And that's why it's a pretty difficult one, I suppose.
So you got the formal diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
What was your mental processing? You know, you had to talk to your husband about it, of course, your daughter as well. How did that go?
Well, I was looking after my dad at the time. I was so concerned with his care because he was not going to die on my watch. You know, I was just like, no way. So I'd come out to this doctor's appointment. Always remember, I just went on my own thinking, oh, it's just, you know, I'm sure I haven't got anything, because I always seem to be turning up with tests for things. And they go, no, everything's fine. So I went in. I remember I wore my pink sort of fluffy furry coat. You know, I was really sort of didn't think there was anything serious going to happen. He said, you didn't bring anyone with you. Excuse me. I said, no. He said, well, I'm really sorry to tell you, pushing the box of tissues towards me. I'm really sorry to Kleenex. I'm really sorry to tell you, but you have Parkinson's. Well, because I hadn't really considered what it was other than a shaking-y thing. I don't know, although I sort of was trying to get it sorted, I really didn't expect him to be saying that. So I didn't really sink in. Then after the appointment, he did tell me a few things. He was upset that I was moving away, because he said, I would love to have done a study on you, all this sort of thing, because you really don't present as someone with Parkinson's. But, so that was interesting to him. So anyway, I came out of his office. I had to go to another appointment for my knees straight after that. And I thought it was rather funny, because I just acted my normal self with them. I was chit-chatting to the nurses the way I just wasn't, I couldn't even think about it. And then I went out into the car park. My husband had said, let me know how you get on. I phoned him. He sort of broke down. He was upset about it. Then I was upset and sort of realised, because he's researched it probably more carefully than I had, you know. Of course, then from then on, I started thinking, oh, I'm going to be a burden. I'm going to be an old, ugly person, can't move, unappealing, smelly, can't do anything. I'll be in a wheelchair. I don't want this. I don't want anyone to have to look at me like that. But so it took I still didn't get completely down, because I was always busy. I was always looking after my father. It was the last year, that's right, it was 2017, last year of my dad's life. My sister said, please don't tell Dad, because it'll just make his anxiety go through the roof. That was difficult. It sounds ridiculous at my age, but it was difficult for me, because I wanted to go tell my dad and him tell me it would be all right, because he was so good at telling us all. You know, he just worried about the whole family all the time. He looked after all of us, you know, right through adulthood. Everybody, he felt responsible for everybody. But I couldn't do that. I do see the point. I mean, I so agree now that if I had said something, he wouldn't have dealt with it well. I didn't feel terrible then anyway. It was just the shaking hand. So, but gradually, once I'd been here, came up to Oxfordshire where we live now, I think I only really get down when I read about it or see other people with it. Because one time I was in church doing this little church service thing for children. There were only 10 of us in the church. The children, 2 had turned up or something, that's all. After the service, the 10 adults who were all doing it, I realised, after talking to them over a cup of tea, that 2 of the 10, myself, had Parkinson's. But I was the only one that ever talked to it. Some people just don't like to come out with it. Whereas now I feel, the first year I thought, I don't want anyone to know because it belittles me. I was doing so well professionally. I didn't want anyone to know that I might not be up to par. So I didn't want anyone to know. But then the second year, when my job then wasn't, I'd left my job and come up here. It was almost like I tell people straight away. It's almost like, not an excuse for, it's almost like if I do such and such, it's because, excuse me, I'll drink some water. If I do something silly or I get tired, it's because I've got Parkinson's. Yes, so I found a better way for me is to be head on with it. It's the things that go through my head are, well, I want to remain attractive, interesting, a kind person that people like to have as their friend. If I just sit in a corner complaining, that's not going to happen anyway. I hope I can continue trying to make myself look nice. That would be a difficult one, because I used to do, yes, in America, I used to do television shows. So I was an interviewer, presenter.
Oh, so you're a professional. I'm a freelancer.
I was the arts presenter on a sort of a program that went out a couple of times a week. I would interview the conductor of the opera or whatever came to Jacksonville. It was regional television. It was like a PBS type of channel. I loved doing that. I really did. I love interviewing people. I'm not used to being one on the other side of it, actually. Why was I going for this? So I had done all this television stuff. Yes, I do feel I've always been this sort of bright person that has cheered people up. And gotten a bit like my dad, really. I've tried to get people, oh, you look lovely, don't worry about it, sort of thing. Let's do this. Let's get. I've always been able to help other people. So I thought I must be able to make myself a bit brighter. I have to say the lack of sleep it's very difficult to be a bright, bubbly person when you haven't had any sleep. The sleeping during the day, which sometimes I just have to do, I just have to have long naps during the day. I feel sorry for my husband because, he's just, I think he feels he's stumbling around this empty house. I'm away with the fairies. But so then, yes, so at this, I was saying, yes, at this church where there were 3 of us with Parkinson's. The other 2 probably never really told people, but somehow I was talking to them. I said, oh, well, I've got Parkinson's, therefore, blah, blah. So I went, oh, well, I've got Parkinson's too. And then another one did. Just made me realize how common it is, how the frequency of it. But I think the biggest impact on me was when I was first diagnosed in early 2017. There's a lady in England, a girl called Emma Lawton. She was diagnosed at the age of 29, I think it was, with Parkinson's. So her life completely changed. And of course, she was working. She works in IT and graphic design, things like that. Couldn't hold the pencil straight, the graphic design, everything. She decided to do a blog for Parkinson's, the British Parkinson's. She decided to do a whole year, every night she would do. She started off, she was very upbeat, this sort of thing. Things would, so some of the blogs then would end in the middle of the night, I can't sleep, it's 4 a.m. Then the dopamine agonist stuff started, I think. That's why she got obsessive about making little craft things all through the night, just like me writing my music all through the night, various things happened. And then suddenly it was all rather horrid, but she still is amazing. Something went wrong with her neck. Her neck is like that now. But she still does. She does TED Talks. She does all sorts of inspirational stuff. She's absolutely wonderful. She influenced me because she was younger. It was. I don't like anyone to have it, of course, but to see somebody who's younger than you dealing with it, not going, well, this is it, I might as well, jump off a cliff, sort of thing, was a very positive experience. So if people can find someone they think of as a mentor, that would be good. I did once go to a Parkinson's exercise class because I couldn't find any dance classes. It really was older people that could hardly move, sitting in a chair. I felt I didn't want to belong. That sounds so, I know one day I will, but I thought it was a bit early to see myself like that. So I more or less sort of entertained all these old people while we were waiting for the lady to arrive to take the class. But yeah, so it's difficult to defining yourself with a disease like that. It's a difficult one because sometimes, like right now, other than the fact my mouth keeps getting very dry, and the fact the subject matter we're talking about, my Parkinson's, I wouldn't think there was anything wrong with me, So, but then other times I feel slower, I feel achy, tired. I think, oh, I can't do that. That's when I think, oh. The struggle is real. Of course, there's people further down the line than I am. Must be so difficult. They do manage to write upbeat things still. They find hope, encouragement from somewhere. So a lot of people from their faith, probably, families.
And I'm so glad that you found those 2 others in the church, because then now you have a small community. You can talk about it, and maybe by talking about it, you help each other. And that is a beautiful thing. I mean, maybe the church helped you find each other in a way, which is kind of so. You've mentioned how you've managed to do so much despite.
Because I'm not working, you see.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not working. So every time I wrote this show, I'd be composing all night long for all day. But then I would crash, I'd have to sleep all the next day. This sort of thing would happen. So it's not very sensible. But yes, it's a very up and down thing. But I think I'm keeping I have to convince myself or I'll be upset, but I think I've kept my brain pretty active by doing all this because it's quite complicated. I write in like 5 or 6 parts sometimes. I do everything, you have to drag and paste every note, every sharp, everything. I did all the band parts, everything, wrote it all out from scratch, made up all these songs. So yes, I think my brain will function at a pretty good level. I mean, I sometimes find I can't think of people's names and things, but then everybody my age says menopause does that anyway. So they're all finding the same thing. So when my friends observe me, they say, there's nothing that you do that we don't do. But they're not seeing me, I suppose, when I'm at home going, okay, I need to have sleep now.
We all find our own rhythms in life, right? Particularly with insomnia, right? You have a situation where that sleep deprivation needs to be addressed, right? There's no getting around it. So having that nap is completely necessary. And also the ability to accept that it is a part of life, not getting too down when it happens, because it's sort of your body's way of saying, hey, I need to catch up a bit, perhaps.
Yeah. It's hard though. Fatigue and depression are so closely linked, so closely. I mean, I think sleep is at the root it is the root cause of just about everything. The gut, the inflammation from the gut, those two things, that's what is affecting everybody. So if somebody sleeps well, eats well, they're giving themselves the best chance they can in life. But sleeping well is not always your choice. Things affect it.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, my own journey, this is why I started the nonprofit, is I had severe sleep apnea. I wasn't diagnosed until I was 29, so I didn't know I had it. Then I knew but then for the next decade, I didn't do anything about it. Then I kind of fixed it a couple of years ago. Wow, going from that 30% living to 100% is actually pretty phenomenal. So that's sort of the birth of Healthful Heroes, which is I want that kind of redemptive arc for as many people as I can. So that's why us sharing our conversations, hopefully we help each other through. Hopefully we give each other the strength to see ourselves in another person, but also to learn from their journeys. That's a big part of why we do this. So I'm very happy that you found a rhythm, so to speak, which sounds like it's working for you. So your husband, all of this, he's been sort of the silent hero. Tell us about how your lives have collectively changed, how he has supported you through the journey.
Well, in a way, our lives are better from my perspective. I can't speak for him, but he does enjoy it actually because he got this opportunity to give up to be my carer. Basically, he's at home. We both love being at home. We love it. He spends his whole time in the garden or fixing things, doing things. That's the person he is. He's a very do-it-yourself sort of person. He follows everything, the politics, the American politics. He follows all that. Gives me summaries of it all, keeps me up to date with things. Very IT oriented. But yes, he has taken on all the cooking and shopping. I can't drive now anyway, but even before I couldn't drive, he does all the groceries, the cooking. I've never been able to cook. I'm horrible. My mother used to say all the time other people were spending in the kitchen, I was practicing the piano. That's my excuse. I'm sticking to it. But I'm just not interested in cooking at all. To be honest, with this Parkinson's, my taste buds, I'm down to childlike taste buds, just as my dad was actually. Just, like scrambled egg, bread. I don't really want meat or anything else, which is, So James, yes, he has been totally a hero. He's younger than I am. I worry a lot that, oh dear, am I putting a sort of stop on his life almost? But he wanted to marry me in the first place, so let's hope he doesn't change his mind. Ready?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Richard. Happy birthday to you. And many more.
Yes, so I manage all the housework. He gets quite cross actually because I spring clean. I don't just clean, I spring clean. So I pull everything out every time. So every day. So I have to say he is obsessive about tidiness. I'm obsessive about cleaning. So between the two of us, although we occasionally nag each other, we do have a very clean house.
I've heard it said that when the house is in order, the mind becomes in order as well. So that's a wonderful thing.
I have to do that when something traumatic happens. When my mother was taken into hospital, I had the flu one time, but I stayed up. I just started cleaning her house. But I got through it. Before long, 11 o'clock in the morning, she'd gone in. By 6 o'clock, I'd finished cleaning. I think that time, so I just kept going. Sometimes your adrenaline kicks in. I don't know if it was a good thing to be doing, but it takes my mind off it. It makes me feel in charge, in control. If I had things out of place, I really have to sort out every box in every cupboard. We're very limited with storage space here, so everything has to be very organised. I just have to know it's all done. So yes, I don't know if that's a Parkinson's trait or just a type A thing. But.
I can only imagine that there will be a ton of folks out there who are type A who, go through an experience like yours. They'll see a lot of their journey in what you've shared so far. So treatments, have they been able to help you? Has your doctor said you're in a good spot in terms of progression and everything like that?
There's a scale that goes from 1 to 5 for Parkinson's. I knew I was 1. I was hovering around 2 a year ago, but the physio sent a report which got me down a bit lower than that, I think. So I'm not too bad. But I did feel this last year, I did feel more of a change, I thought, than before, but I still managed to score. I don't know how, because I think it's the competitiveness in me. When they say do these exercises, jumping up and down from a chair or whatever, I can suddenly do them, although I don't dream of doing them at home. I have to perform well. Yes, the levodopa and the carbidopa, every time you have an increase in it, you feel obviously a lot better. I'm on it 4 times a day, 100 milligrams. Then I take a carbidopa, a Madapar CR. That means it's a long, extended release one overnight. So the consultant did say you still have leeway. You could still be taking higher dosages each time you take them. But it is frightening that you think you get to this point where maybe they're not going to have any effect. But then I suppose you look down the DBS, the deep brain stimulation route.
So, well, it sounds like you're 2, not a 3 or 4 or 5, which is great. So that's a wonderful, sort of in terms of the progression, it's fantastic. Sounds like you still have that room with the medication to move forward if you need to. So that's great as well. So I believe that brings us all the way through your journey. So firstly, thank you so much, Isabelle, for sharing your journey from the beginnings. Well, first of all, for sharing your great story about how music has influenced everything, how, you have found strength in church, created a life with your husband who gets to have his fun in the garden, keep the house tidy for you. So all of that's wonderful. So this is a point in the conversation where, what's your advice? What would you say to others, either who have just been diagnosed or who are further along in their journey? What sort of things do you share that would help them?
Okay, I would say don't worry that everybody at the beginning feels like a sort of victim. You feel you've a sort of failure in life because you've got this disease, so you're less of a person. That's why I didn't want to tell anybody. I did, certainly professionally. Try to get your head around that at least in a way it was a relief to be told that you've got something, because you've had all these other symptoms for so long. Try and zone in on that relief rather than the other side, because if you can own up to it, express it to other people can see somebody that they possibly admired, or whatever, they can understand that you are not brought down completely by this disease. It is inspirational for them to sort of say, oh well, if I got it, maybe I'll be okay. Of course, I think reaching out to other people, you always get more back than you're giving. It's really true. I'm not being facetious. This karma thing, the more you care about other people and you make them feel better and their lives better, you feel better about yourself. It all comes back to you. People are saying thank you. Music, this song you wrote is so wonderful. Da 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 da. It makes you feel so much. So I would just say my main advice is give out, share that you've got it. Don't whinge about it, but share you've got it. Just always be thinking there will be at some point a cure. I would give the advice to exercise, although I'm a total hypocrite on that. I just do walking and clean the house ferociously every day, but I don't do enough exercise. But that is the best thing to do, is exercise. As far as drugs go, I think you just have to go with what your consultant has told you. But do beware, dopamine agonists do have this scary reputation for making you obsessive.
Well, Isabel, that was fantastic advice. I reflect as we've had this conversation. You had this concern or anxiety about sort of becoming older, less, you know, yeah. What I would say is this. I mean, I see someone in front of me who is living a rich, full life, who is contributing to her community, who's building a life with her family. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing. So congratulations on doing everything that you're doing in spite of, which is phenomenal. I'm absolutely certain folks will learn from your experience, will be inspired by what you have shared. I would love to listen to some music at some point. So if you have a recording of some music, feel free to send it to me. Maybe I can.
Actually, it was only going to be made on my phone with my piano, but it's for Parkinson's Gala in England for Christmas. So I'll be making that recording the next couple of weeks. I'll send it to you if it's any good.
Oh, wonderful.
Sounds
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, Isabel, thank you so much for taking the time today.